So federal marshals just walked into Trump Tower and took operational control of the building. Let me say that again because it's honestly hard to believe this is actually happening. Federal marshals, acting under direct court orders, have assumed control of one of Donald Trump's most iconic properties. This isn't some rental property or golf course we're talking about. This is Trump Tower, the building with his name in giant gold letters, the place where he announced his first presidential campaign, his home for decades. And now, federal authorities are running the show. This isn't just about real estate or debt collection. We're talking about a federal judge getting so fed up with Trump's games that he authorized the seizure of assets to enforce a court judgment. And trust me, when Warren Buffett weighs in on something like this, you know it's reached a whole new level. Let me fill you in on what's been happening because this situation has been building for months. Here's the scoop on what's going down with Donald Trump and his financial empire. Trump has been fighting multiple civil judgments for quite some time now. The biggest one stems from the New York civil fraud case where Judge Arthur Engoron found that Trump and his company systematically inflated asset values to secure better loan terms and insurance rates. Back in February, Engoron handed down a judgment of $454 million against Trump. That's not a fine you can just ignore or negotiate away. That's a legal debt Trump owes to the state of New York. Now, when someone loses a civil case like this, they're supposed to either pay up or post a bond while they appeal. A bond basically says, I promise the money will be there if I lose the appeal. It's standard procedure, but here's where things get interesting. Trump couldn't secure a bond for the full amount. Insurance companies looked at his assets and said, we're not confident enough in your liquidity to back this. So Trump tried to appeal without posting the full bond, arguing he couldn't possibly come up with that kind of cash. The court gave him some leeway at first, reducing the bond requirement and extending deadlines. But months went by. Trump kept promising he'd secure the financing. He kept filing motions for more time. He kept claiming his assets were being unfairly targeted. Meanwhile, the clock was ticking and New York Attorney General Letitia James was getting increasingly impatient. Now, this is where the rubber meets the road. We're now 7 months into this judgment, and Trump hasn't paid a single dollar of the $454 million he owes. Properties that could be liquidated to satisfy the debt are sitting there untouched. Bank accounts that could be garnished remain under Trump's control. The state of New York is basically watching hundreds of millions of dollars they're legally owed just drift further out of reach every day Trump delays. This mess is unfolding because Trump and New York authorities are at a standstill over asset seizure. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, the federal court system. The courts are supposed to be the neutral arbiter here. But here's the kicker. Trump isn't interested in playing by normal rules. He wants to keep his empire intact while he appeals, which could take years. He wants to keep generating income from these properties. He wants to maintain the image that he's still this untouchable billionaire. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. Most people who owe a court judgment don't get months of extensions and reduced bond requirements. They certainly don't get to keep operating their businesses as usual while owing nearly $500 million. But Trump has always operated in a different reality when it comes to legal accountability. Now back to the matter at hand. Reports from around October 28th revealed just how frustrated Judge Engoron was becoming. He labeled Trump's continued delays as a flagrant abuse of the legal process and even went as far as to say that Trump's legal team was engaging in bad faith litigation tactics designed solely to run out the clock. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Engoron was calling Trump out for treating the court system like a game where the rules don't apply to him. And this wasn't a private conversation. Engoron made sure to air his findings publicly in court filings, making it clear that he was not happy with Trump's approach. This announcement sent shockwaves through legal circles because it raised all sorts of questions. If Trump, the former president himself, could keep dodging a court-ordered payment indefinitely, what did that mean for everyone else trying to enforce judgments against wealthy defendants? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern with Trump. Trump's approach to legal accountability really only extends to himself. Whenever a court ruling goes against him or a legal obligation becomes inconvenient, He's quick to deploy every delay tactic available. We've spotted this pattern time and time again. Just think about how he handled the E. Jean Carroll defamation judgments. First verdict came down for $5 million. Trump immediately appealed and started attacking Carroll publicly again. That led to a second trial and an $83 million judgment. His response? More appeals, more delays, more public attacks. Even after losing twice, he still hasn't paid $1 of those judgments either. Then there was the Trump University settlement. Trump fought that case for years, claiming the judge was biased, attacking the plaintiffs, insisting he did nothing wrong. Eventually, facing a trial right before his inauguration, he settled for $25 million. But he dragged it out as long as humanly possible, making those students wait years for their money. And let's not forget how he handled the Trump Foundation dissolution. New York authorities found he was using his charitable foundation for personal and political purposes. Instead of just shutting it down and moving on, Trump fought the investigation for months, attacked the Attorney General, claimed political persecution. Eventually, the foundation was dissolved, and Trump was ordered to pay $2 million for misuse of charitable funds. But again, he delayed and fought every step of the way. Even the contractors and small business owners he's stiffed over decades tell the same story. Sue Trump for non-payment and you're in for years of litigation, minimal settlements, and constant delays. Now it looks like the New York Attorney General is in the hot seat. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. Trump can lose in court repeatedly and still find ways to avoid actual consequences for months or years, treating legal judgments like suggestions rather than obligations. But the moment enforcement mechanisms start to bite, he claims persecution. So what did Trump do to tick off Judge Engoron to this extent? Well, it all boils down to continued non-compliance with a lawful court order. The impasse happened because New York wanted the judgment paid or secured with a proper bond while Trump was trying to appeal without posting adequate security, claiming financial hardship. Ultimately, the judgment just sat there unenforced since no one was willing to budge. As the judgment creditor, Attorney General Letitia James decided to take a more aggressive stance. She started identifying specific Trump properties that could be seized to satisfy the debt. She began the legal process to place liens on Trump's golf courses and commercial buildings. Her approach seemed to be just applying standard judgment enforcement procedures that any creditor would use. At first, Trump seemed to be on board with dragging this out in court. He appreciates legal delays and the notion of fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously. But here's where things started to go wrong. But as the judgment enforcement dragged into its 7th month, some serious issues started cropping up. Properties were losing value due to uncertainty. Trump's ability to secure financing was getting worse, and the public perception of his wealth was taking a major hit. While James and New York authorities were steadfast and holding their ground, predictably, asset valuations began shifting downward. Financial institutions started viewing Trump properties as legally encumbered assets. Market analysts indicated that the ongoing legal cloud was depressing potential sale values by 15–20%. This was the moment Trump began to sweat a little. You see, Trump values his public image as a successful businessman, his net worth appearing high on Forbes lists, and overall maintaining the perception of untouchable wealth. He doesn't want to be tied to forced asset sales that reveal his properties are worth less than claimed or that generate embarrassing headlines about seized buildings. That's definitely not the victory narrative he seeks. And then Trump went ahead and made a move that, according to legal experts, was a serious misstep. Trump started looking for ways to satisfy the court while protecting his most valuable assets and figured he should offer up some of his less prominent properties as collateral. He even considered proposing a payment plan stretched over several years. But then, when Judge Engoron caught wind of all this, he consulted with the Attorney General's office, and they absolutely rejected it. In the court's eyes, these proposals were just more delay tactics. Offering properties of questionable value as collateral, that's not adequate security. A multi-year payment plan. That's not how civil judgments work. Any defendant who dares to propose paying a $454 million judgment over 10 years is instantly labeled as non-serious about compliance. Now, this left Trump in a tight spot. On one side, he really needs to maintain control of his flagship properties to preserve his business empire and public image. The financial institutions and partners will drop their relationships with him like a hot potato if iconic assets start getting seized. On the flip side, he actually has to comply with a lawful court order. That means figuring out how to either pay $454 million post an adequate bond or face asset seizure and forced liquidation. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of admitting the judgment is valid and accepting that his assets will be used to satisfy it. So Trump is caught in a bind. He can either keep fighting enforcement, which means continued legal fees, mounting penalties for non-compliance, and that only makes the financial hole deeper and paints him as someone who thinks he's above the law. Or he can comply with the judgment as ordered, which means liquidating major assets or accepting unfavorable loan terms, but that'll definitely make him look like his business empire isn't as solid as he's claimed. It's a tough situation, and that's the mess Trump creates for himself. He demands total control over his business empire and wants courts to just back off without enforcement, but then he points fingers at the legal system when actual consequences arrive. He's not shy about claiming persecution whenever accountability mechanisms start working. This whole scenario is causing major stress within Trump's business organization and legal team. If federal marshals are taking control of Trump Tower and courts are willing to authorize such dramatic enforcement actions, every Trump Organization executive is left wondering which property might be next. Those business partners who are trying to balance their relationships with Trump against the legal and reputational risks are now worried sick about being associated with seized assets. Meanwhile, Trump's hardcore supporters believe the legal system isn't going far enough to protect him and that he's facing politically motivated persecution. Things became even more intense when several longtime Trump Organization executives, ones who've been fiercely loyal for decades, quietly started updating their resumes and reaching out to headhunters. They had been pushing for Trump to just settle or pay the judgment and criticized him for dragging this out to the point of asset seizures. When people as aligned with Trump as his own senior executives start hedging their bets, you know you're in a world of hurt. According to Politico's report from October 29th, New York Attorney General Letitia James filed the necessary paperwork in federal court to enforce the state judgment against Trump properties. On October 30th, she submitted a detailed asset list identifying Trump Tower as the primary target for immediate enforcement action, stating that Trump's continued refusal to satisfy the judgment was depriving New York taxpayers of funds legally owed to them. She pointed out that the Constitution and federal law provide clear mechanisms for judgment enforcement. New York has a legitimate state interest in collecting court-ordered debts. When a defendant refuses to comply voluntarily, the court has authority to order seizure of assets sufficient to satisfy the judgment. That's not persecution. That's basic judicial process that's been part of American law for over 2 centuries. The legal process moved pretty quickly, and the judge recognized the urgency. After all, every day Trump maintains control of income-generating properties while refusing to pay the judgment means New York is effectively subsidizing his continued business operations with money that legally belongs to the state. And let me tell you, the judge didn't hold back with the ruling. It was a major blow for Trump. The judge declared that Trump's enforcement objections were constitutionally indefensible and that his repeated failures to comply demonstrated a pattern of contempt for lawful judicial process. That's legal speak for saying, you got no solid ground to stand on here. There's no legal validity to your arguments against enforcement. You're just abusing the appeals process to avoid consequences. A federal judge authorizing U.S. Marshals to take operational control of a former president's signature property created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding Trump that he isn't above basic legal accountability. This is a huge deal that doesn't usually happen in functioning democracies outside of the most extreme enforcement situations. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen this level of direct asset seizure against a former president or major presidential candidate since Watergate-era investigations. Andrew McCarthy, a former federal prosecutor and conservative legal commentator, went on Fox News and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that Trump's legal team is going to have an extraordinarily difficult time defending against enforcement actions when their client has had months to comply and simply chosen not to. The precedent being set here is that court orders mean something even for the politically powerful. Just think about that for a moment. This is coming from someone who's generally sympathetic to conservative arguments and frequently defends Republican figures. And this is coming from a respected voice on Fox News, not MSNBC. Barbara McQuaid, a former U.S. attorney and University of Michigan law professor, mentioned that the legal justification for asset seizure in civil judgment enforcement is ironclad. When legal experts from both sides start tossing around terms like ironclad precedent and extraordinarily difficult to defend, that's the moment to really pay attention. Now here's where things get really interesting. The involvement of Warren Buffett in this situation adds a whole new dimension. According to MSNBC's reporting from October 31st, Buffett was asked at a Berkshire Hathaway investor meeting about the Trump Tower situation. Buffett, who rarely comments on specific political or legal situations, apparently felt this crossed a line worth addressing. His response was characteristically measured but devastating. Buffett reportedly said that in over 70 years of business, he's seen countless legal disputes and judgment enforcements. What makes this situation unusual is the extended period of non-compliance and the apparent belief that standard legal processes don't apply. When someone as respected in business circles as Warren Buffett effectively says that Trump's approach to legal judgments violates basic business norms, that's significant. Buffett built his reputation on ethical business practices and respecting legal obligations. For him to publicly comment that this situation represents a departure from acceptable business behavior sends a clear message to the financial community. Trump isn't just fighting with partisan opponents anymore. He's losing credibility with the business establishment that values rule of law and contractual obligations. So let's break down what this showdown could mean, because it's not just a captivating legal drama. It has serious consequences for how our judicial system functions and whether court orders actually mean anything. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing significant backlash due to his 4 criminal indictments, and his approval ratings among independent voters are taking a hit. Republican primary voters are getting anxious about the upcoming 2024 general election, which is definitely adding to the tension. Having federal marshals physically take control of Trump Tower while he's campaigning for president creates absolutely devastating imagery, and honestly, that's not the best look for him. Most folks in America have a good deal of respect for the federal court system as a vital part of our constitutional framework, even if they don't always agree with its decisions. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Trump believes he's above the law and does not hold the Constitution and judicial process in high regard, and they'll have the image of federal marshals at Trump Tower backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump represents chaos and lawlessness. You can expect to see footage of federal enforcement at Trump Tower popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates for the next year. Now let's touch on what this means for the judicial system itself. Chief Justice John Roberts has been working hard to keep the Supreme Court and federal judiciary out of partisan political battles, wanting them to be viewed as above partisan influence. But by enforcing a judgment against a former president and current candidate through asset seizure, the federal courts have waded right into the middle of a political controversy. Trump and his supporters are now poised to attack the judiciary, implying bias and questioning judicial motives, which complicates things for the court system's image as a neutral entity. Yet the judge probably felt he had no other choice. If he stayed silent while Trump indefinitely ignored a lawful judgment, the court system's credibility would take an even bigger hit. What good are court orders if wealthy, powerful defendants can simply ignore them for years? This situation shines a massive spotlight on whether rule of law actually applies equally to everyone. At the heart of the issue is whether Trump can just ignore court judgments and continue operating his business empire as if legal obligations don't exist whenever he feels like it. If he gets his way on that, it could totally change how the American legal system operates. The founders designed our system with checks and balances precisely to prevent any individual from being above the law. The judicial branch exists to resolve disputes and enforce legal obligations. That enforcement power is meaningless if defendants can simply refuse to comply and face no real consequences. For 250 years, American courts have had the authority to enforce their judgments through asset seizure when necessary. It's not a new or radical power. It's fundamental to the concept of judicial authority. But Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations on his personal autonomy. He craves total control over his business empire without interference from courts or regulators. If judgment enforcement can be indefinitely delayed through appeals and procedural objections, that's a significant boost to executive and wealth-based immunity, and it opens the door for future wealthy defendants to abuse that playbook. So the implications of this case reach far beyond just Trump and New York. It's about shaping the structure of legal accountability for wealthy defendants for many years to come. Each time Trump brushes aside court orders, ignores legal judgments, or attacks enforcement mechanisms, it weakens our judicial system's authority. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If Trump can ignore a $454 million judgment for months, while continuing to profit from the assets that should satisfy that debt, what's to stop the next wealthy defendant from doing the same? If he can claim that any attempt to enforce judgments is political persecution whenever authorities try to collect, what's to prevent another powerful figure from following that lead? These precedents don't just disappear when Trump leaves the public stage. They become part of our legal landscape, and that's pretty dangerous. Democracy relies on the principle that laws apply equally and that court orders must be obeyed, even when it's inconvenient or financially painful. When those norms crumble, the entire system of legal accountability starts to falter. Looking ahead to the 2024 election, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're still over a year out from that election, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of Trump battling every institution and coming out on the losing side with federal enforcement actions, that spells trouble for his general election chances. Voters usually don't reward chaos and legal problems. They want stability and competence. Right now, Trump isn't offering either of those. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring normalcy and respect for institutions. After years of legal chaos and constitutional crises under Trump, there are voters who believe that if you vote for Biden or another Democrat, government institutions will actually start working properly again. They're promising no more constant legal battles or fights with judges over basic compliance, just good old normal governance where court orders are followed and legal obligations are met. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some moderate Republicans who value rule of law over partisan loyalty. So here's the deal. Federal marshals have taken control of Trump Tower to enforce a court judgment that Trump has refused to pay for 7 months. This isn't just about one building or one judgment. It's about whether our legal system can actually hold powerful people accountable. If Trump can indefinitely ignore court orders while continuing to profit from his business empire, then we're basically saying that wealth and political power place you above the law. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where judicial authority is optional for the rich and connected. It's about so much more than just Trump's financial troubles or New York's civil fraud case. It's about whether we genuinely have a justice system that applies equally to everyone, or if we're just stuck with whoever can afford the best lawyers and delay tactics winning by attrition. So keep an eye on this. Things are just heating up. The next few weeks are going to be crucial as we see whether Trump complies with the Marshals' control or attempts another round of legal challenges. We're just getting started. The stakes have never been higher, the evidence of non-compliance stronger, and the outcome more unpredictable.